Well, I was up early this morning and thought to myself, I need to cut some opals. There's just days when you feel lucky. Anyway, I've been cutting a few of the opals, and I've completed a few, and it struck me that maybe it would be fun to just take a little video of the process. I'll run through one, maybe two stones, and then show you the results of what I've done today a little later. So I almost always start with a batch of stones that I've already worked on these a great deal, but then what happens is I get the dirt and most of the host rock, much of the host rock off of them, and then I just keep them for a while and wash them, and I'll go through and sort them after a while. But right now they're just kind of mixed up. So you can then, if you clean things up and you get a sense of where there might be precious opal or color, and you can see that some of them are quite brilliant, even without any polish, but they're thin. And so those I'll use to make doublets or some kind of composite, maybe a mosaic. They can be quite striking. Here's a piece of shell that's really beautiful, but again, it's too thin to safely make into a solid opal. But many of them, what you're looking for is, like this one, has a very tiny band. You can see that little band there. That's where the precious opal is. And so to cut that, you have to make a decision about where does the band run? Does it run all the way over, all the way through? And which side are you going to cut it on? Which side are you going to face? Which side is going to be the back? What shape is it going to be? All that. So opals are really, really fun. I find them enormously gratifying to cut, but they can be very frustrating because it takes a bit of experience, I guess, built up to figure out the best approach. And I'm still a novice at this, but I'm doing better. So what I've done is I've gone through this and I've picked out a bunch of stones, several that I'll be playing with today and maybe tomorrow, for various reasons that are kind of pretty. And I might, what I want to do is show you the process on one of them probably today. You can see that these are all white opals from the Coober Pedy region of Australia, and they all have some kind of very, very pretty color. This one, I might work on it just because it's very interesting. Sadly, it's a little unusual. This one has these beautiful longitudinal rays, see, of precious opal in this dimension. However, so that means that's a really interesting piece, but then they come up as beautifully bright pinpoints when you orient them at 90 degrees. The problem is that makes a very tiny stone, and I could probably still get a reasonably pretty stone if I face it this way. So I may just do that as an experiment and see how that goes. Stones like this, once again, have very, very thin color bars. You can see the very narrow color bar here that I have to approach it, but then it thickens out so that it's thick on this side. You can see that beautiful potential color there, and very thin over here. So you have to be very careful orienting the stone when you decide to cut it. Anyway, I'll make a decision on which ones of these to do and show you how I go about it. Well, the first thing that I'm going to do, I have a 5 different grits of diamond wheel, and I'm going to start with these 2 hard wheels, a 140 and a 325 grit. These are both diamond impregnated. They're very, very tough. These are what are called sintered, which is very nice. I spent a fair bit of money on them, but these should last certainly my lifetime. Anyway, it's getting very noisy, so I'm not going to talk during it. Whoops. But what I'm going to do is use these 2 wheels to decide on the orientation of the stone and take off a little bit of the edges, and then we'll put it on a dop stick. Okay, well, for starters, that's what we have. So now we'll put it on a dop. Now, of course, the purpose of a dop is to gain better control over the stone. If it's large enough, you can do pretty well with your bare hands, and you can feel things really well. But it's difficult to get the stone polished nicely all the way around. So you typically hold it with something, and traditionally that would be wax. And I learned to do this with wax. But to use wax, which it's fairly common and it's not that hard, but it does require heating and temperature. And so many materials like opals are very sensitive to thermal shock. And that's a problem. I also like to do materials like glass and shell, natural materials, as well as amber. And these materials are particularly heat sensitive, so wax doesn't work well with them. Other materials can be used like super glue and epoxy. But thanks to Riley Gunn, who's an opal supplier and jewelry maker in Australia that I deal with, Riley came up with these glass dop sticks. And they're a little delicate, but they're actually they're a game changer for me. I've converted 100% almost to using these glass dop sticks. So the way they work is you use a UV curing resin. So I use a UV cure resin to attach it to the dop stick, and it works amazingly well. And of course, it's much less temperature sensitive. So what I'll do is when it's perfectly dry, or pretty dry, I'll put a nice dollop of the resin there. And I take a flat end of a glass rod in this case, because this one is about the size I want for that little rod. I could have used the green dop, but I decided not to. And holding it as perpendicular as possible, I'll start the process of UV curing. Sorry, my hand is in the way at the moment, but pretty soon I'll lift it, okay? So you can see that the purpose of the glass is that the UV can get in there and polymerize the resin all the way through. It holds quite well. It takes just a few seconds, maybe a minute, to harden and become pretty good. Once in a blue moon, it'll pop off on the wheels, but that's the same thing as happens with wax at times. So I've had very, very good luck using this system. So we're just going to put this on the stick, and then we're going to go through the wheels and shape it and polish it. Okay, that last step was a cerium oxide on a leather buff, which helps give it a very high polish. So what I need to do now is simply remove this from the dop stick, and to do that, oftentimes you can just put your fingernail in there and it'll loosen up. What I like to do is use a dull razor and simply push that resin until it gives, because there will be a point at which it doesn't hold anymore. There we go. You can just pull that right off. There. And that pulls off really quite nicely. And then, of course, what we want to do is we want to polish the backside of the stone as well, which I always do, because I found that, number one, it refines the shape a great deal. And, just in case you want an open back, it's good practice. And frankly, since I set most of my own stones, I like to have them perfectly flat, and I like to know that there are no imperfections on the backside, which could cause stress in the setting and lead to cracking. So what I have to do now is put back on a dop stick, but this time I have to dop this side. And that's also what this UV resin is extremely good for. Because typically it's a little harder to hold this curved surface, and it's polished, so it's not going to stick very well to things. So what I'm going to do is, again, we'll put a dollop of this resin right on there, and then we'll take the dop stick, put it on there as centered as I can. I almost never get it perfect. I just have to adapt when I'm on the wheels. Let it set for a few seconds so that it doesn't shift around. Alright, so now it's just a matter of taking it off the dop and inspecting. Once again, on the crown, quite often you can just peel that right off. Okay, and just don't use anything hard or sharp to get this resin off, because you don't want to ruin your perfectly polished surface. Okay, so I just use my fingers. Make sure I've scraped all of that resin off. Give it a wipe. There's a few little dots on it. There's a few little spots of dirt. There we go. Yes. So this is not the brightest of opals, but man, it is pretty. It has a lot of really nice color in it, flashes all the way through, and a fair representation of spectrum. There's even some red in there, which is really attractive. So let's take a closer look at that one.